Welcome to Lawyer Like an Athlete podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Lawyer Like an Athlete podcast with Amy Wood. I am your host, Mike Leon. You know, Amy here is a psychologist, executive coach. She's the author of a great book that's out there, Lawyer Like an Athlete, where she challenges the grind culture of law and replaces it with a high-performance model that's borrowed from elite sports. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about focus, distraction, and why attention may be the most undertrained skill in the legal profession. Almost said underrated. It probably is underrated, but it also is undertrained. Amy, it's good to see you. So the law profession demands a level of sustained attention, right? Because let's be honest, the people's lives are at stake in a lot of these instances. What makes the focus so central and so fragile at times in the legal profession?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Mike. It's always good to be here. And, attention, I would say focus, attention, concentration, whatever you want to call it. It's so hard to do today because we have so many distractions and things are moving so quickly to the point where we're just disrupted all the time. And so I look at focus as a true superpower. If you know how to focus, you can get a lot done. And attorneys are really challenged in this area. And I think the reason why, though they're really highly intelligent people and they really have a high capacity to focus, they lose that ability to focus because they believe that they have to pay attention to everything that tries to get their attention whenever it happens. So anytime their phone goes off, anytime a text is coming in, anytime a signal's coming in telling them they have an email, they have a client who's trying to reach them, whatever it is, they're trained in their workaholism culture to stop whatever they're doing and answer that signal immediately, okay, which only pulls them off track. The other thing, and there's not a lot of control over this, but they're constantly shifting from one priority to the next. And sometimes they can say, I'm not going to look at that until I'm done with this, but sometimes they have no choice. So they're deeply involved in some project, and all of a sudden someone says, you got to move over here and do this. This just happened, or this court date got changed. Now you've got to do this. So, part of it is because it's the nature of the work, but a lot of it, to be frank, Mike, is because they're not setting appropriate limits for themselves and they're not making the most of their time and energy. And they're causing themselves a lot of unnecessary distraction and stress just by the way they go about their work.
In that unnecessary distraction part right there, I'm sure you've seen this where lawyers have come to you. They've been working in these high pressure environments. They have a brief lapse, like you mentioned. Why or what have you seen through line that makes the attention collapse? Like when the stakes are the highest, their attention seems to collapse. Why is that?
Well, I think you had to look at what the brain is capable of doing. And studies show that when you're working on something that requires a lot of high level thinking, and attorneys are involved in this kind of work all the time, you can only be at your best for about 90 minutes. And then you start to break down if you don't take a break away. And it's tricky to honor that because quite often when we're working on something that's really hard, we all know what this is like. If you've been to graduate school, you're working on an assignment with a deadline, and maybe you're working like nonstop, just getting up to go to the bathroom and grab a bowl of cereal to get it done. And you think you're in the zone. You're thinking, okay, if I just keep going, I'm going to get this done. And you think because you're feeling so good and like you're really paying attention and you've really got this, that you're doing your best work. But what's actually happening beyond about 90 minutes is your brain is starting to get really tired. You're starting to miss important details in the work you're doing. You're starting to make mistakes. You're really starting to run out of steam. And so a lot of attorneys, they do not take enough breaks. And they don't understand the need to get up about every 90 minutes and refresh somehow to come back with that renewed focus they need to really do a good job.
Amy, you mentioned the elephant in the room, so let's tackle it head on.
Okay.
That's technology, right?
Yes.
So rather than treating technology as the enemy, I'm
Yes.
obviously my dad works in tech. I worked in tech. There's a
Yes.
strong case for using it, right? More
Yes.
selectively. So how would you advise lawyers to kind of tell the difference between the tech that's going to support their performance and enhance it versus the one that's draining it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes, when I talk about this idea of getting control of your technology and I bang the drum of, technology is disruptive and it's getting in your way, people think that I hate technology. But the fact is, I love technology as long as you know how to manage it to get the most out of it. So, what I advise attorneys to do is look at all the different ways they're using technology, and I have an inventory in my book that helps attorneys go through this in a way that's very, very comprehensive and helpful. But essentially asking with your phone, like, how is this phone helping me? How is it allowing me to have a great life and do my very best at work and meet all of my deadlines? And then the bigger question here, how am I not taking control of the phone enough so that it's actually pulling me away? How am I using my phone in ways that are draining, distracting, destructive to me? And the same with everything else you're interacting with in terms of technology. So your laptop, how are you using your laptop to do the very best job you can do at work and to have the most fulfilling life possible? And the same with everything else you're interacting with, even the television. Um, that's really the key here, and also to recognize that all of these things are addictive. Phones, for example, studies have been done to show even if you don't care about your phone that much and you're not even into looking at it and checking texts or checking for voicemails or emails or what have you, and you're the sort of person who never has their phone with them when you're driving, studies show that when someone is sitting in a car intent on driving and you put a phone next to them, even the person who doesn't care about their phone, when they hear a buzz or a beep, they will look at that phone. It's impossible not to. So the key here is to figure this out. How can I use my technology to do my best work and to be as happy as possible? And how can I eliminate the ways that I'm using technology that are actually hurting me and draining me and pulling me away from my focus? And then developing a plan around that. Because unless you do that, unless you take charge of your technology and you're the one managing it, it's going to manage you.
Yeah. It's very Pavlov's dog, that
Yes,
example.
very much.
Amy, let me ask you, because obviously we mentioned the distractions of technology and phones, but what other kinds of distractions have you seen that have tend to kind of erode the focus without it being obvious like a phone?
Some other things that tend to erode our focus because we're all moving so incredibly fast and we're so focused, not just attorneys, but everyone. We're so focused on production that we can see, so you can see someone sitting at their laptop working while they're really productive. Um, you're not taking the time to process things that you've been through, like emotional responses to things, like thoughts that may be distressing you. So if you're not processing those emotions and you think, I'll just push them away and focus on my work, what you don't know is that you're putting quite a bit of energy into pushing those emotions down and pushing those thoughts away so that you can focus. And so you don't have as much energy to actually focus as much as you could be focusing if only you took breaks and allowed yourself to work through emotions. The other thing that's related to that, because we're moving so fast again, is maybe we haven't dealt with certain things in our lives, and it could be errands we have to run, anywhere from that, getting chores done, to maybe you have a big issue that you haven't resolved in your life, because you say you don't have time, and that is nagging away at you in an unconscious way, stealing your energy, stealing your focus. So a couple of examples here. Let's say that you got into an argument with someone and it's really upsetting to you, but you just don't have time to deal with it right now. And if you just dealt with it and had a conversation with that person, you could put it to rest and move forward. But instead, it's taking up your headspace. Or another example might be, let's say that you've had some odd symptoms, medical symptoms, and you really should go to your doctor, but either you're scared or you just don't value that time away from work. And so you're saying, I'm just going to push through and I'll deal with it another time. Well, again, these two things that you're not dealing with, you're not facing reality in these two ways, it's going to be there and it's going to be calling you unconsciously for your attention. So it's getting in the way, it's interrupting your focus, and it's pulling you away from doing good work.
Amy, let's talk a little bit about multitasking because I'm sure in the law of profession, it's praised as being efficient if you're able to multitask. When does multitasking genuinely work, and when does it become a liability?
Well, multitasking works. When you don't call it multitasking, I call it sensible multitasking. Okay, sensible multitasking is the opposite of what I call useless multitasking. So let me start with that. So multitasking doesn't work if you're trying to focus on two different activities that both require your full attention. So think about it like this. Think about it. Remember the old days you'd go shopping for a TV and you would see all these TVs on at once on the shelves, and what if you tried to pay attention to what was going on two different screens? You would be able to do it, because to pay attention to what's going on TV, you have to pay attention to just one screen. Or another example, let's say you're out to lunch with a friend and it's a serious conversation, but then you hear someone you know talking in the booth behind you, and you're trying to pay attention to that as well as listen to your friend talk. You can't do it. You're going to lose big important parts of the conversation. So this is where we make a mistake with multitasking. When we're trying to do two things, like let's say we're trying to be in a Zoom meeting and we're also looking at our screen trying to type up an important project. Doesn't work. You're going to miss important parts of the conversation on Zoom, and you're probably going to make mistakes. So that's useless, senseless multitasking. Now, there is such a thing, as I said, as sensible multitasking, and that is combining two activities that don't require your full attention. So, standing in line somewhere and responding to social texts on your phone. Good opportunity to get up to date, right? Or folding laundry at home while you're listening to an audiobook. There are a lot of things that we can combine, as long as we're not taking away from the concentration required to fully be present for either activity.
Amy, staying on that, what other kind of habits or practice will help you rebuild that and strengthen that focus and the ability to concentrate deeply? Anything else you would recommend?
Yeah, I would recommend, because again, the brain gets tired from focus. And usually, when we think we're really focused because we've been working at something for a long time, our brain is fooling us. We're actually losing steam. So it's important on a regular basis to just get away from high level work so that you can rest and relax and recover. And again, that word recover, we've talked about already in these podcasts, because that comes from the world of sports, because sports figures understand that when you're working really hard at something and giving it every bit of your attention, you need to get away and recover so that you can come back and then refocus. So anything that you can do, even though this sounds like a waste of time to many attorneys because they don't value not working, don't understand the value of getting away, to find ways to just not think. Even if you have 5 minutes, just close your eyes and just be. It's very helpful. It helps you to resume all of the inner resources you need in order to focus better. Because remember, your focus, especially with all the distractions we have going on, with all the pressure in a very high pressure career, you can't do it unless you have every bit of energy aligned with what you're trying to do.
Amy, what's one change or maybe a few changes in the way someone works and how they experience their day that you would advise them to do after listening to this?
Well, I would advise just trying not to be so scattered and breaking up your attention all the time. So, again, the problem here is that attorneys are expected to be available all the time to take a phone call, all the time to answer an email, to get up if there's another need somewhere else. And some of that is unavoidable. There are going to be emergencies, there are going to be priorities that present themselves when you're working on something else and you have to shift course, but try to minimize the amount of that. Moving your attention from one thing to another by setting limits, by telling your clients, I'm available to return phone calls at these particular times, by putting your phone away when you're trying to focus on your laptop so that that's not pulling you away. And let's face it, a lot of adults, not just attorneys, will say, but I can't put my phone away. What if something might come through that's really, really important? How often does that really happen? A lot of attorneys, what they're doing now when they have meetings is they're all agreeing they're going to put their phone away where they can't see it for, let's say, 45 minutes. And then because everyone is so in need of checking their messages, what they'll do is say, okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Everyone can check their phones and then let's all come back. So there's a lot of ways that you can be less fragmented by taking control over your technology and designing your day as best you can to have prolonged periods of focus.
Amy, one more thing before we let you go. How can people find your book?
One would be Shop ABA. So my book is published by the American Bar Association. So if you go to shopaba.org, you can order it there, or you can always go to Amazon and find it there.
Amy, thank you so much for the time, the insights, and sharing all this with the audience. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
That wraps up today's episode of Lawyer Like an Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more about Amy's work, you want to go check out that book, Lawyer Like an Athlete, do me a favor, visit amywoodpsyd.com. Thank you again. But before you go, like, subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I am Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.